Volta is a recognized expert in the fields of disruptive innovation, business reimagination, and emerging technologies in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, where he does most of his work. He is deeply passionate about the use of emerging technology at scale to do good in society by creating sustainable economic opportunity, prosperity, and dignity for all. Volta is a Deloitte Africa's Chief Digital and Innovation Officer and a member of the firm's Global Innovation Program. He's also a faculty member of Singularity University and is the recipient of the Constellation Transformation 150 Awards. Volta, over to you.
Yes, you can use whichever mic. Do you have the clicker? Where's the clicker?
I must say, I want one of those. When I grow up, I want one of those welcomes. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Sishle, for the privilege to engage with the audience and to engage on this topic, a topic that I'm deeply passionate about. And it speaks to the future of jobs in this new construct of the fourth industrial revolution, which has become a very emotional conversation, not just because we recently saw in the press, and it's been an ongoing theme in our country, that we've got a huge unemployment problem in the country, but that digitization, automation, and modernization of our economy is important, but it's going to have a significant impact on the way we conduct business. And we need to think about it. And it starts with this simple equation. And I'll tell you why it's simple, and I'm going to take you through it, right? Despite everything, all the hype around digitization and digital transformation and all these fancy terms, we have to look at this equation to sort of understand it a little bit better. And the first part of the equation says that in the world of digitization, we look for evidence where the capex of the machine is cheaper than the opex of the human. Does that make sense? All right, so we're looking for evidence where the capex of the machine is cheaper than the opex of the human, because obviously we're investing into technologies to do things cheaper. It's got to be more cost effective. So that's something that businesses look at. Then if we get that right, then we've got to look at the next part of the equation. It says that when we're looking at these digital transformations, we've got to look for evidence that we get exponential dividends. So the exponential G says that I unlock new revenues through product and service innovation. So I implement this technology to unlock new revenues inside my business, so growth. That's one of the things we look for. The next one, the P, is exponential productivity and efficiency. In other words, I can also look at implementing these new technologies to reduce the cost at which I do business. Because if I reduce the cost at which I do business, I've got a better chance of survival and winning in a very competitive market. Just think of it, doesn't matter how low the price of oil gets around the world, Saudi Arabia will always be the winner because they produce oil at the lowest price point. So this is something most companies around the world are striving for, is to be the lowest cost producer in their sector. And then finally, the X is exponential experience. Many organizations implement these technologies to unlock phenomenal experiences for the customers as they deal with the organization. It gets the customer to come back, stay longer, spend more, and tell other people about it. Does it all make sense? So if we now read the whole equation, it says that in the world of digitization, we're looking for evidence where there's proof that the capex of the machine is cheaper than the opex of the human. And if we've got that, we can then look at the implementation of this technology to unlock exponential growth inside our business, exponential efficiency and productivity, and exponential experience. And if we get that right, we become exponential organizations. We become winners in our economies, in our sectors, in the world. And this is what we have to do as an economy. We need to remain globally competitive, but this results in a very emotional reaction that says, well, if we're talking about the capex of the machine and the opex of the human, what does it mean for jobs? And this is where we get all concerned, and it's valid concerns, it's real emotional concerns, because our jobs give us our relevance, it's how we sustain ourselves, it gives us our psychological pleasure as well, and this has been an ongoing debate, and the media gets hold of it and talks about all the jobs that are going to be lost around the world. But the reality is that this conversation has been going on for a very long time. Right? So this is not a new conversation. It's been going on for decades, actually centuries. The thing is that every time the workers and the laborers have fought against the machines that are going to take their jobs away. And every single time, the laborers have lost, the workers have lost, because the economics of the machine always work. And there's an important lesson in there, is that we can't resist this change that's washing across the world. But what we've got to do is to figure out how we unlock advantages to create value and new ways of generating prosperity and opportunity in our economies. So what this does, and I'm going to go through this very quickly, is that it's got every single CEO and policymaker and our president thinking about how do we get the world ready, our economy ready for the future of work. And this is a very high level, really a 20,000-foot view of the trends that are shaping how we work. The first one is timeplosion. And I refer to timeplosion as in a construct that says we're trying to do a lot with less time. Just think about how we work. You know, there's now you can buy 15-year-old whiskies that are made in 12 hours. We're doing a semester of learning. In a week, there's a whiskey called Glyph that's coming to South Africa. 15-year-old whiskey that's made in 12 hours. All right, have a look. Be on the lookout for that. Then there's the construct of the connected workforce, the workforce ecosystem, which says that we're going to be employing people very differently and engaging with companies in a very different way. There's the connected workforce that says that there'll be no separation between the worker and the organization. And I'm not talking about emails and instant messages and Slack. I'm talking about a world where we're going to be monitoring the machine on the workplace in the real-time basis, and the workplace is going to be monitoring us on a real-time basis. There's lifelong learning, and I'll get to that in a second. There's longevity quotient, and I'll unpack that as well. And then there's sustainability. And I'm not talking about environmental sustainability or economic sustainability. I'm talking about social sustainability, doing responsible work. In other words, we've got to transform our economy, but we can't forget about the broader population of the economy that is unemployed as we do that. So I want to unpack two things, right? The first one is this workforce ecosystem. And in the new world of work, jobs are going to be disconnected, or work is going to be disconnected from jobs. And jobs are going to be disconnected from companies. And companies are going to become platforms. And we're soon going to be in a world where the traditional, you're going to get employed by an organization in a formal process is going to disappear. It's going to be a case of the organization is going to require a skill, and it's going to be made available to everyone to participate on that platform. And based on your success record, your skills base, the ratings you got for the previous task that was done, you will be brought into the organization to do that. In the US, 90% of new jobs are unconventional jobs. It's this gig economy construct, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And some of the big companies around the world, companies like Lego, General Electric, Volkswagen, Coca-Cola, are starting to implement this kind of thinking to solve their problem. And there's a realization that companies no longer employ the smartest people in the world. The reality is the smartest people in the world might not be working for you, but you want them to come into your network. But you don't want to necessarily pay them a full-time salary, so you bring them for projects. So that's certainly one of the things that are going to shape the way we work in the future. The next one is this thing of lifelong learning, and we touched about it earlier. This is critical. We are now in a state of constant knowledge decay. And the estimation is that your knowledge decays on average 30% a year. That means after 3 years, what you've learned before that is irrelevant. Right? So you've got to take responsibility, all of us, whether you are just enter the workplace or whether you CEO of a company, you've got to take responsibility to constantly be refreshing your knowledge. Right? Instead of seeing knowledge as a destination, the degree or the certificate that someone spoke about earlier, this is going to be like riding a wave. You're constantly riding it. It never stops. And your competitive differentiation is going to be based on your ability to stay on top of this knowledge curve. Right? The other thing that's certainly coming out in the world of lifelong learning is being good at one thing is no longer going to be good enough. The trend worldwide is hybrid thinking. And it doesn't mean that I'm generic or average in two different jobs. It means I'm equally good in two different jobs. And it's typically an old world job and a new world job. So I'm a doctor that understands artificial intelligence. I'm an engineer that understands IoT. An architect that understands sensors. Right? The reality as well in this space is that corporates are not going to be able to upskill and retrain the people quick enough. It's going to come down to the individual to remain on top of this new way of thinking and staying abreast of changes. The other one I just want to touch before I move on is the longevity quotient. And we talk about the millennials, and millennials. The reality is generational theory, it's an important conversation, but we have to be sober about it in our economy. Generational theory only applies if you live in a very homogeneous environment like New York, London, Paris, Amsterdam, etc., where the difference between the poorest and the richest is very narrow. In a city like Johannesburg, we've got multiple generations in the same age group. So a kid that's born into Sandton today is born as a Gen Z. A kid that's born into Alex, into extreme poverty, is born as a baby boomer. And they will be brought up with different perspectives and paradigms through which they navigate through life. So that's an important thing to think about when we conduct business. There's also a realization that while the millennials are the largest group, the work cohort group in the world, the fastest growing work cohort group in the world at the moment is the over 65s. Yeah? I'm going to say that again. The largest work group are the millennials. The fastest growing work group are the over 65s. They don't want to retire. And I think for most of you in the room, and hopefully for everyone on the stage as well, we will never have to retire because we don't want to retire. Right? We want to continue contributing and growing and developing that knowledge. There's also another thing, that the age category between the age of 44 and 55 is when you're at the highest chance of being successful as an entrepreneur. It's very interesting. We tend to think it's always the very young individuals that are successful at startups. Most startups are certainly very young individuals, but also most startups fail. So the most successful entrepreneurs are between the ages of 44 and 55. And it's because this is where you've peaked from a business wisdom perspective, a creativity perspective, and now your humility is developing as well as a human being, right? So this is all very important in the environments that we all operate. So we operate in companies that compete at a global level. We've got to be first world orientated in terms of how we think, developed economy in terms of how we think. But we've got a challenge, and that in South Africa, we can't just think about what it's like to work at a company that's listed on the stock exchange. We've got to come to the realization that while we have got these phenomenal jobs, 30% of our population on average is unemployed. And there's something I want to show you. Over almost 600 million people around the world are living in extreme poverty, right? You add another 200 people that are underpaid, underemployed, or working without dignity or safety. This is the world's reality. But there's a bit of positive news. If you look at that side of the screen, 0.8% of people are escaping poverty every second. This is good news, right? It should be 1.6, but we're at 0.8%. But that's positive. Now, the sad thing is that when I unpack it at a South African level, is that we are adding people to poverty at a rate of 7.3 people every hour. All right? And this is a reality that we've got to face. So we can't just modernize our workplace. While we have to modernize our workplace to remain so it ensures globally competitive and thrives in this new economy, we can't forget about this. So we've got high levels of unemployment, we've got low levels of productivity, we've got 0.8% of the world's population and 3.5% of the world's unemployed in South Africa. Right? How could this happen in the country that is considered one of the most advanced countries in the world from a financial regulatory perspective? We've got 2 Nobel Peace Prizes Peace Prize winners from the same street, the world's most advanced constitution. This should not be happening in a country like ours, right? But we have to fix this. And there are green shoots. Well, the first green shoot is that in the world of digitization, automation, and modernization, is that if we keep our skills relevant, for every single job that we lose to automation, we'll create 1.74 jobs. So that's positive. If you're skilled and you've got a mindset of continuously learning, that knowledge, longevity, renewing your knowledge, avoiding the knowledge decay, for every job that gets lost to automation, modernization, and digitization, we create 1.74 jobs. This is a global consensus. Over 20 million executives interviewed in that piece of research. That's positive. And what it says is that if we keep abreast to in terms of our knowledge, we'll be all right. But we've got to take responsibility for that. But we still don't solve the unemployment and the underemployment challenge that we have in the country. But even there, I believe there's green shoots, and the green shoots that are being enabled by technology. And I'm going to speak to three economic levers. The first one is the construct of distributed value chains. And this is where we have what I refer to as micro-entrepreneurs that aren't inventing technology, but they're leveraging technology to create employment. The second one is collaborative consumption, which speaks to, as a poor individual, I can't afford an asset. But if I bring the community together, I can afford that asset. And because I brought the community together, the community has access to that asset like it's theirs. And so they can create economic activity. And finally, it's this construct of economic catalyst, leveraging digital to revive old industries that have lost their luster and bring them back into this digital world. So I'm going to unpack these very quickly. Distributed value chains. This is where we fulfill a function that a corporate doesn't want to fulfill anymore because it's too expensive. It's not economically viable for them to do it. But for people in the room, for people working at corporates that don't have time, they'll pay for that service. And so you've got companies like TaskRabbit from the Nordics. What they do is they help people assemble furniture. So if I've bought a furniture and I need to assemble that at my home, I find out who in the community knows how to assemble furniture and has got time. So they're trading in skills and they're trading in time. And they'll get paid $200 to assemble a bed, for argument's sake. That's created a tremendous amount of work. You've got companies like Ilova that Karen works with. I mean, there's an organization that's distributed the growing of sugarcane to the community. I mean, we know Ilova for sugar. And they've passed it on in some of their geographies to the communities, for the community to grow. So they've distributed the growing of sugar, created a tremendous amount of employment by doing that. DoorDash is a company owned by the Vision Fund, has employed 500,000 people around the world to go to shopping for you. It's a different take on online shopping. Instead of you doing your order and it comes from a warehouse to your house, DoorDasher, you hire a dasher to go shop for you at your supermarket. And they take the stuff off the shelf. So not only is it an online, offline type construct, but they also keep the local grocer relevant. All this creates employment. You've got companies like Sweep South, South African company, that with 90 million rand has created 12,000 jobs. And the people that work for them work with far more dignity, benefits, and salary. So all these companies, if I add them up here, there's over 1 million jobs that have been created by these organizations across the world. The second one is collaborative consumption. Uber is a great example of collaborative consumption, probably overdone. And collaborative consumption is this construct, again, where we share assets to drive economic activity. And I can do it with 3D printers. There's a great company where I can share my 3D printer with my community, or I can use it with farming equipment. And companies like Hello Tractor, Trotro, etc., share a smart tractor in the community. So instead of a subsistence farmer only farming half a hectare, because they're doing it manually, then I can do 5 hectares and perhaps employ people from the community to participate. So the technology doesn't take jobs away. It's creating more economic momentum in those communities. So the City of Seoul is experimenting with this at the moment. They're experimenting collaborative consumption in one of the richest cities in the world, where we share stuff with one another as opposed to just going to buy. So we create money in the community. And then finally, it's a construct of economic catalysts, where we go revive old economies with digital. And you've got things like a company like Stockfella and Livestock Invest. It's 2 South African entrepreneurs. Stockfella digitized the Stockfell. So I no longer have to be in the community to participate in my Stockfell. And there's a tremendous amount of trust and transparency. Livestock Invest started IoT in cattle. So if I want to own a cow, which is very important in our culture, I don't have to have access to a farm or a rural area. I can participate in cattle ownership digitally. And if I can't afford the whole cow, I just buy half the cow. Fed Group, also a South African company. And through Fed Group, if you want to own a beehive, you can give money to Fed Group and they'll give it to a farmer that will establish a beehive and farm your beehive for you. Harvest the honey, put the honey in a jar on the shelf, sell that honey, and give you dividends on those honey jars. Right? Again, we're creating employment. And then finally, companies like Boomer.mobi, which are solving problems in the community around illegal dumping. And just through doing that, a single entrepreneur, Sifusizi, has created 18 jobs in his community. So I'm going to wrap up with this slide. It is frightening, this world that we're in. It is going to change, and we can't resist it. I think that's an important thing. So we need to figure out how do we embrace it and move with the changes and extract as much value or create as much value as possible. But at the same time, it's to create a broader economic construct that says that the citizen, private sector, and policymakers have to come together, not around the table, but on the same side of the table, to work together to find policy that harmonizes with business needs, that is socially impactful and important, and economically viable in order to address the unemployment challenges and this new future of jobs construct that we have in the digital economy. Thank you very much.